ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتابه العزيز وأستعيذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إنما يخشى الله من عباده العلماء وقال يرفع الله الذين آمنوا منكم وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ صدق الله العظيم. My dear respected elders, brothers and sisters, I've been asked to give a talk upon the issue of the minimum knowledge required for a Muslim. So I could actually answer that in one sentence and I could finish the khutbah and start the salat. Okay, so prior to doing that and giving you the answer about how much is the minimum requirement of knowledge, we need to understand the importance of knowledge, the definition of knowledge, how important knowledge is for a Muslim to attain, and then after we get that background and the foundation, then to know how much knowledge I need in my life, that will become easier to understand and easier to digest. So firstly, what is the definition of knowledge? We have to differentiate between what knowledge is and information is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us in the Quran, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. Indeed, the people who have the khashya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the ulama. So, from this understanding and this definition, we can understand that ilm, by its very nature, it has a tendency to make a person attain and develop the taqwa and the khashya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Makes him aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Makes him a better Muslim. Makes him a better practicing person. Makes him a better person who fulfills the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and fulfills the rights of the people around him based upon the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him and he practices the knowledge that he has attained. Because knowledge is not just to get information. Knowledge is not the ability to give lectures. Knowledge, it has 3 criteria to make it true knowledge. First of all, you learn that knowledge, and secondly, you practice that knowledge, and thirdly, you propagate that knowledge. These are the 3 things that define ilm. Otherwise, it's just information that you have. It's just the ability to talk that you have, the ability to give a khutbah that you have. Okay, so that's the difference, and that is what differentiates true knowledge from knowledge which is not true. The Prophet ﷺ, he used to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for refuge from knowledge which is non-beneficial. Allahumma inni as'aluka ilman nafi'a, he said. Allah, I ask you for knowledge which is beneficial. Wa inni a'udhu bika min ilmin la yanfa'. He used to seek refuge from that knowledge which is not beneficial. Again, the definition of beneficial knowledge is the knowledge that you practice and propagate and you put into your life, and people benefit, people around you benefit from it, society benefits from it, and you become a contributing factor to the positive betterment of society. And knowledge which is not beneficial is that knowledge which a person may learn but doesn't practice. Again, that is the definition of that is knowledge. And that knowledge on the Day of Judgment will become hujjatun alayk. It will become a proof against you by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just like the Quran. Imma hujjatun lak aw hujjatun alayk, as the Prophet ﷺ said. The Quran is going to be either a beneficial proof for you on the Day of Judgment, it will benefit you on the Day of Judgment, or it's going to go against you on the Day of Judgment. How is it going to be beneficial for you? When you learn, internalize and practice the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when you are reading in the Quran that you have to obey your parents, and then you disobey them, that those ayat that you read and you knew and you heard in khutbahs, and you knew that the obedience of parents was obligatory upon you, and yet you sidelined it. As another ayah of the Quran says that وَقَالَ الرَّسُولُ يَا رَبِّي إِنَّ قَوْمِ اتَّخَذُوا هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ مَهْجُورًا. Oh my Lord, my ummah has basically thrown the Quran behind their backs and didn't practice it. Then these very ayat that you knew and you heard in khutbahs and you knew that you had to practice them, those ayat are going to stand up against you on the Day of Judgment, and they're going to curse you. And they're going to be a proof against you, and proof against you means, proof against me means that those ayat will basically be standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be the prosecutor's witnesses. Just like a prosecutor who has a witness in a courthouse, he's prosecuting you and he brings witnesses. The Quran is going to be a prosecuting witness on the Day of Judgment. That knowledge is going to be a prosecuting witness on the Day of Judgment. So when the Prophet ﷺ, he asked for knowledge which is beneficial, and he sought refuge from that knowledge which is not beneficial, this is what is meant. So whatever knowledge we learn, whether we hear it from a khutbah, or we are learning it in study circles in the masjid, or we learn it from a scholar specifically one-on-one, that knowledge has to be learned, it has to be practiced, and it has to be propagated, and these are the rights of knowledge. We see many people who have authored books. For example, I was in one of those interfaith type of meetings a few weeks ago, and I found a person whose name was Todd Whitman. And if you look this person up, you will find that he is a pastor, he's a university scholar, but he has written a book which talks about the discourse that took place between the shaitan and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during the time when Allah commanded the angels to prostrate to Adam alayhi salatu wasalam, and he refused. That whole discourse, it comes in a few places in the Quran. So this person, he basically went through all of those places in the Quran and understand that he reads and understands Arabic fluently. and he wrote a book on this issue of the shaitan and his discourse with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this reading of the Quran, this researching of the Quran, didn't give him the tawfiq to become a Muslim. So this is a very classic example of a person getting information, writing books on Islam, but yet not getting the tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of getting hidayah and guidance. And not only not getting guidance, but propagating a false belief of Christianity, being a pastor for that religion and propagating it, just out of respect for the person. He was very respectful to me and respectful to the Islamic religion. He was not disrespectful in any way, shape or form. But my point is that if that knowledge that you are learning is not prompting you to get guidance, it's not getting you close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that is not knowledge, that is not ilm, that is in fact just mere information that is not beneficial. So this is something that we need to understand and we need to keep in mind. On the other side, how does knowledge become beneficial? We have to make sure that we have grounded ourselves in taqwa, then that knowledge will benefit us. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us in the Quran, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَيُعَلِّمُكُمُ اللَّهُ. Have the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have the awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will teach you, He will give you knowledge. So a person who is committing sins and who is disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that knowledge is not going to benefit him. There's a very famous couplet that Imam Shafi'i used to recite. Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, obviously one of the four great Imams of fiqh, his taqwa, his wara', his closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his khashya can never be undermined. And we can only imagine how he is actually telling us this story of his. He says, شَكَوْتُ إِلَى وَكِيعٍ, and this is a couplet that he recites, شَكَوْتُ إِلَى وَكِيعٍ سُوءَ حِفْظِي. I complained to my teacher Waki' the situation that I was having, that I was feeling weakness in my memory. Now remember Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, he's got a photographic memory. And he basically, he was known for writing poetry or just reciting poetry. If you told him, recite poetry about this subject, he would just start reading. Just what's called fil badi. He used to just make up the poetry as he went along, and it used to rhyme and everything. This was Imam Shafi'i. But somewhere along the line, he felt that his memorization was becoming weak. So he says, شَكَوْتُ إِلَى وَكِيعٍ سُوءَ حِفْظِي. I went to my teacher and I complained about this memorization of mine. فَأَرْشَدَنِي إِلَى تَرْكِ الْمَعَاصِي. So my teacher, he told me, guided me to leave committing sins. He told me to stop committing sins. And you can imagine a person of Imam Shafi'i's caliber, what kind of sins would he be committing? This is something that's unimaginable that we can think about him, that he would be committing anything major. If you would think maybe something minor that he might have done as a human being, as a human mistake. But Waki', his teacher, told him to stop committing sins. Why? Waki', his teacher, goes on to say, فَإِنَّ الْعِلْمَ نُورٌ مِّنْ إِلَهِ. Because knowledge is a nur from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَنُورُ اللَّهِ لَا يُعْطَى لِعَاصِي. And the nur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not given to a person who commits sins. So again, when that nur comes, when that light comes, then that knowledge becomes beneficial. Otherwise, a person is just retaining knowledge and nothing else. So this is something that we need to understand. It's just like when you have a utensil, you have a bucket which is full of mud, and you put crystal clear, pristine spring water inside that bucket. Do you think that crystal clear water, which was clean and is being poured into this dirty bucket, is it going to remain clean? No, it's not going to remain clean. So the utensil of knowledge is our heart. And if our hearts are unclean, then the benefit of that knowledge will not be attained, and that knowledge will become contaminated, not because the knowledge is bad, but because the utensil that we are taking that knowledge in is contaminated. So this is something that we need to understand, that the Prophet ﷺ said, ألا إن في الجسد لمضغة إذا صلحت صلح الجسد كله وإذا فسدت فسد الجسد كله. Be aware that there's a piece of flesh in the heart that once it becomes good and clean and pure, then the rest of the body becomes good and clean and pure and obedient. And if it becomes corrupt, then the rest of the body also becomes corrupt. So this is something to keep in mind, that what is the definition of knowledge and what is the difference between that and information, we have to keep in mind. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also tells us, يَرْفَعِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevates the status of the people who have iman from amongst you, and the people of knowledge that have been given knowledge, their status will be elevated in this world and in the hereafter. This is a natural tendency that we all have. But first and foremost, when we see a scholar, when we see a person who has knowledge, who is giving, verse, and we also see that knowledge being practiced, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala immediately puts love into our hearts for that person. And he automatically becomes respected. He becomes elevated in society. And this is not the reason that a person should attain knowledge. He should attain knowledge only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it's only a natural inclination that everybody has as humans, that when they see a knowledgeable person, when they see an alim, when they see an imam who has knowledge, then they respect him and they elevate him to a status, and the same thing will happen in the hereafter. The same thing will happen in the hereafter. And that is why the Prophet ﷺ, he elevated the status of ulama, right very close to the Anbiya ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ said, أَلَا إِنَّ الْعُلَمَاء وَرَثَةُ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ. Be aware that the ulama, the scholars, are the inheritors of the Anbiya ﷺ. Why is that? Because the Prophet ﷺ is the last prophet. There's no prophet to come after him. This is our belief. And a person who doesn't believe that is out of the fold of Islam. So the mantle of prophethood and the responsibility of prophethood, taking the religion and teaching it to people, which was the responsibility of the Anbiya ﷺ, it becomes the responsibility of the ulama. It becomes the responsibility of the scholars. That's why they are the inheritors of the Anbiya ﷺ. And the hadith goes on to say, فَإِنَّ الْأَنْبِيَاءَ لَمْ يُوَرِّثُوا دِينَارًا وَلَا دِرْهَمًا بَلْ وَرَثُوا الْعِلْمَ. The Anbiya ﷺ, they didn't leave in inheritance dinars and dirhams. They left knowledge. They left knowledge. Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala, he once went into the marketplace after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, and he addressed everybody and he said, "What are you people doing here? You're busy in your buying and selling and dealings, financial dealings, and the inheritance of the Prophet ﷺ is being distributed in the masjid." So everybody thinking that they're going to get a share of the pie of the inheritance of the Prophet ﷺ, they rushed to the masjid and they saw nothing but study circles, a halaqah of Quran, a halaqah of hadith, a halaqah of fiqh taking place in the masjid. They approached Abu Hurairah, said, what were you saying? Abu Hurairah said, "This is the inheritance of the Prophet that is being distributed. Sit and benefit from it." So the scholars have been given this status by the Prophet ﷺ, and this is what is meant by يَرْفَعِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ. Iman by itself, and having the prerequisites of Iman and fulfilling the rights of Iman, it gives a person a status in the first place because he's a mu'min in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in addition to that, if a person he is a scholar, then he gets a further status, and this is what is meant by this ayah. The Prophet ﷺ, he said in a hadith, مَنْ يُرِدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. Whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends khair for, He gives him the fiqh, He gives him the understanding of the religion. This basically, again, is talking about the scholars. The scholarship, people who have been given the knowledge, the fiqh and the understanding of knowledge. The word fiqh, we use it to mean jurisprudence, but the fiqh means an understanding. It means knowledge. Okay? So, who has been given knowledge by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah has intended khair for him. He has intended goodness for him. So, it means that whoever is our leader of the community and he has been given knowledge, we should respect that person and we should treat him as the Prophet ﷺ said. There's another hadith, which this hadith that I mentioned, it's in Bukhari, but in the notes to this hadith, in the sharh of this hadith, Hafiz ibn al-Hajar, he brings about another hadith which has an addition. And that addition said that مَنْ لَمْ يَتَفَقَّهْ بِالدِّينِ فِي الدِّينِ لَمْ يُبَالِ اللَّهُ بِهِ. And whoever does not have tafaqquh fi deen, whoever does not have the understanding of deen, who does not have the knowledge of deen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't care for him. So, a person who has knowledge, who is striving to seek knowledge in any way, shape or form, small or big, dedicated, full-time or part-time, even if it's coming to your weekly lectures in the masjid or evening lectures in the masjid, this makes a person who is trying to be a person who has tafaqquh. And inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will count this person who is making this minimal effort to get this knowledge. Allah will count him amongst the persons who has khair in him. So, if a person is not even making that effort, then obviously Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't care for that person. We need to be from the people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appreciates and loves, and that is going to happen when we try to attain and seek knowledge. What is the status of the people of knowledge? The Prophet ﷺ, he said in the hadith, فَضْلُ الْعَالِمِ عَلَى الْعَابِدِ كَفَضْلِي عَلَى أَدْنَاكُمْ. فَضْلُ الْعَالِمِ عَلَى الْعَابِدِ كَفَضْلِي عَلَى أَدْنَاكُمْ. The Prophet ﷺ, addressing the Sahaba, he said, now first of all, understand the status of the Sahaba as compared to the Prophet ﷺ. The Sahaba, they have a very high status, undoubted. But if you were to accumulate all of the Sahaba together, they cannot even touch the status of the Prophet ﷺ. They cannot. All the status of the Sahaba put together cannot get even close to the status of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet in this hadith, he says that the difference between an alim, a scholar, and an abid, a person who is a person who just worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is like my status compared to the lowest from amongst you. Just imagine the huge difference there is between the Prophet and the lowest of the Sahaba. An ordinary Sahaba who maybe is not from the Asharatul Mubashara, or he's not from the scholars that we know, just a normal person who just saw the Prophet ﷺ in his lifetime while in the state of Iman. This is the definition of a Sahabi. So the status, the difference between the status of the Prophet ﷺ and this one Sahabi is the difference between a scholar and a lay person. Huge difference. And according to another hadith, كَفَضْلِ الْقَمَرِ عَلَى النُّجُومِ, that the difference between the qamar, the full moon, and the stars. When you see the moon, it basically blinds out the light of the stars, right? You can hardly see the stars which are around the moon. So the moon is the alim, and the star is the lay person, the regular worshipper. So there's a huge difference that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned here. And then in the same hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ اللَّهُ وَمَلَائِكَتَهُ وأهل السماوات والأرضين حتى النملة في جحرها وحتى الحوت يصلون على معلم الناس الخير. The malaika, the angels, and the dwellers of the heavens and the earth, even the ants in their holes, and the fish in the sea, and the birds in the sky, all the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all the creatures, they actually pray for that person who teaches good to people, to humanity. Why is that? What do the fish in the sea, and the ants in their holes, the birds in the sky, the insects, the animals, what do they have, what connection do they have to this person who's a scholar, who's teaching people good? The reason is that the animals, they are more far-sighted than us. We are very short-sighted. We think about the short term. We think about short-term benefits. We think about today and now. The animals, they think of far-reaching consequences. They know that this scholar who is teaching people good, who is teaching people khair, who is teaching people right from wrong, he is going to teach people good things, and they will practice those good things. They will stay away from ma'asi and disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They will get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once they do that, then this will remove the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the earth. And once the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is removed from the earth because of the khair that is being spread by this scholar, and the good that is emanating from it, from this khair, from this knowledge, that punishment is removed, and the animals, as a consequence of that, are also saved from that punishment. So that's why they pray for that scholar who is teaching people good. This is the reason for it. The animals even realize that khair is being spread by a scholar. So we need to appreciate the scholars in our midst, the ulama, while the angels are praying for them, while the animals are praying for them. You know, humans have no respect for scholars. SubhanAllah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us all. Now, related to this is the aspect of adab, respect to knowledge. Respect to knowledge and the bearers of knowledge. It's narrated by Abdullah ibn Mubarak. He says that he was sitting with Imam Malik rahimahullah in a lecture that he was giving, a lecture on hadith. He says, كنت عند مالك ibn Anas وهو يحدثنا. Malik ibn Anas rahimahullah, he was narrating a hadith to us. He was narrating a hadith to us. فجاء العقرب فلدغته 16 مرة. A scorpion crept up inside his shirt, behind his back, and it stung him 16 times. The people who are in that study circle, they are actually confused what's going on. Sometimes Imam Malik is becoming blue, sometimes he's becoming pale, sometimes he's becoming red, and they're wondering what's going on with him, but he continues the lecture. He continues the lecture until he finishes it. After the lecture he says, raise up my shirt. Something's happening behind me. So they raised up the shirt, and he had been stung 16 times by a scorpion. So they said, Ya Aba Abdullah, لَقَدْ رَأَيْتُ مِنْكَ عَجَبًا. They said, Oh Abu Abdullah, we saw something very strange from you today. You know, the scorpion was stinging you again and again, and you kept on teaching. So what is this? Why didn't you just tell anybody? So he said, نعم أنا صبرت إجلالا لحديث رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Yes, I maintained sabr and patience إجلالا لحديث رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, simply out of respect for the hadith of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. Now compare that to what we have nowadays and the lack of respect that we have for knowledge. You know, we are reading the books of hadith while lying in our beds. Maybe we have wudu, maybe we don't. We are basically, you know, when we're in a lecture, we're basically sitting disrespectfully, we're not listening, playing with our phones, for example, checking our text messages, updating our Facebook status, whatever it is we do nowadays. This is because of the lack of respect that we are not giving the scholar when he's giving a lecture the full attention. So, knowledge entails respect. Knowledge entails adab. And this is something that is slowly creeping out of the community. I remember when I started my studies, I was sitting, and where we studied, in the madrasa, we had to sit on the floor around the teacher. So I was sitting on one side of the room, and on the other side of the room, somebody asked me for a pen. So, being a 13-year-old who basically doesn't know any better, I threw the pen across the room to him. So my teacher, he called me over. He said, "Why did you throw the pen?" Like, what did I do wrong? I didn't understand what was going on. But the lesson that that teacher gave me has stuck with me throughout my life. He told me, look, this pen is a tool of knowledge. It is the thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sworn by. Noon, wal qalami wa ma yasturun. This is the thing through which we attain knowledge. This is one of the tools. So respect the tool of knowledge. Don't throw it. Anytime somebody asks you for it, go across the room and hand it to him in his hand. Similar should be the case with the respect to the books. Respect to the place where you're seeking knowledge. Any person who's learned martial arts or karate will tell you that when you go into the dojo, which is the place where people learn karate, they are expected at the door to actually make a bow. They bow to the dojo. They bow to the place where they are learning the knowledge of karate and martial arts. Why? Because even martial arts, they teach that the respect of the place, the sanctity of the place that they are learning this art from, it has to be respected. So what about that knowledge that is going to give us the success of this world and the success of the hereafter? How much should we respect it? How much adab should we have? How much adab should we have for the circle of knowledge? How much adab should we have? How much respect should we have for the scholar who's teaching us knowledge? This is something that we need to keep in mind. And finally, before I actually tell you the purpose of the khutbah, which I mentioned at the beginning, I'd just like to mention a hadith to you, which is a very profound hadith, and the results of that hadith we are seeing with our own eyes. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَنْتَزِعُ الْعِلْمَ انْتِزَاعًا وَلَكِنْ يَقْبِضُ الْعِلْمَ بِقَبْضِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's not going to just snatch up knowledge that is just going to disappear off the face of the earth. But what's going to happen? يَقْبِضُ الْعِلْمَ بِقَبْضِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. He's going to take away the scholars slowly. One scholar is going to die, and then another one is going to pass away. And there's not going to be anybody to fill their shoes. And then what's going to happen? اتَّخَذَ النَّاسُ رُؤَسَاءَ جُهَالًا. People are going to take ignorant people as leadership. فَسُئِلُوا. They're going to be asked religious questions. فَأَفْتَوْا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. And they're going to give fatwas without knowledge. فَضَلُّوا وَأَضَلُّوا. They're going to be astray themselves, and they're going to lead people astray. What's happening in front of our eyes in this country, there are tens, if not hundreds of masajid throughout the US, they actually don't have imams. They are looking and searching desperately for imams, but they cannot find them. So, they make do with whatever they have. The person who can, say a few sentences in a khutbah, he is put in the front, and he does the khutbah to the best of his ability, and I'm not questioning their sincerity, but in many cases, rather than guiding people, they misguide people because of the lack of knowledge. So this is happening before our eyes. So this thing of preparing ulama and scholarship, it is something that we need to take very seriously. There is a huge lack of scholars within the communities and within many masajid throughout the US, but this career path of being scholars is not taken seriously. We want our kids to be engineers and doctors, and there's nothing wrong with that, but this is also very important, to be leaders of communities. They're becoming doctors, they're becoming engineers, is not going to benefit us in the hereafter. What will benefit us is if we make our child a hafiz of the Quran and make him a scholar who is going to lead hundreds and thousands of people. Because we are encouraging our children to do that, after we pass away and while we are in our graves, the people that are guided because of our children, the people that are coming onto the right path because of our children, we will continue to get the reward of that. And this is what is meant by that hadith. إِذَا مَاتَ ابْنُ آدَمْ إِنْقَطَعَ عَمَلُهُ إِلَّا مِنْ ثَلَاثٍ. When the son of Adam passes away, his deeds are cut off except from three sources. And one of those sources is عِلْمٌ يُنْتَفَعُ بِهِ, knowledge which is benefited from. Knowledge which is benefited from. So think of that. Think of what will benefit me after I pass away. How many days do I have left in this world? After I pass away, is the money of my son going to benefit me? Are the riches of my son going to benefit me? Or this spiritual work that he's doing and guiding people towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is that going to benefit me? This is a question I need to ask myself, and everybody here needs to ask themselves. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides us to what is correct and what is the truth. Now, going on to the question that was asked earlier, and the reason for this khutbah, how much knowledge is mandatory upon a person to learn? How much knowledge is mandatory for one person to learn? There are two things. There is something which is called fard kifaya, which means that if one person in the community is taking that responsibility, then the whole community is absolved from that responsibility. And that is the role of the scholar. That the scholar, he has basically learned, he has sought knowledge, and he has dedicated himself to learning knowledge to a degree that when people come and ask him questions which are related to their divorce and business and marriage and burials and all of these things that people are not confronted with on a daily basis, but they can turn to a scholar to get their question answered. This is fard kifaya, and you have to have at least one person in the community that fulfills this role, which is the role of the Imam, that people can turn to and ask him questions and get their questions answered. This is fard kifaya. Then there's a stage of fard ayn, which is mandatory upon every single person, individually. How much knowledge is mandatory for me as an individual, you as individuals, on a daily basis? The things that I'm confronted with, the things that I need to know to practice my religion. And remember, religion is not just coming to the masjid and praying. Religion is the thing that I do outside also. My business, my work, how I conduct my affairs, how I deal with my neighbors. That is mandatory for me to learn. So, from the ibadat perspective, from the worship perspective, I must learn how to pray from childhood when the obligation of salat is upon me. From the age of puberty, I must know, because salat is now obligatory upon me. So, the masail of tahara, purification of the body, purification of the clothes, how to make wudu properly. Every single Muslim needs to know that from the age of puberty. Now that person gets older a little bit, becomes of marriageable age, now he's about to become a husband, she's about to become a wife, now he needs to know the masail and the issues related to marriage, the rights of the wife, the rights of the husband, the rights, the idea of the mahar, why the mahar is given, how much the mahar should be, what is walima. So the masail associated with marriage, that person now must know, because he is that thing is going to be an everyday thing for him now. So it becomes mandatory for him to learn that knowledge. A person is about to open a business. The thing that he's about to sell in that business, is it halal? Is it haram? All of the masail which are related to that business, it becomes obligatory for him and mandatory for him to learn so that he can practice that knowledge. It becomes obligatory for him to learn that knowledge. So the summary is this. On a day-to-day basis, on a daily basis, the knowledge that I need to lead my life in the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and stay away from the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on a daily basis, it is mandatory for me to learn that knowledge. This is the definition and the very minimum that is required from me as an individual, from you as individuals to learn. This is something that we need to keep in mind, and this is something that we need to work towards. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us tawfiq to understand and practice what has been said and heard. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد قال الله تبارك وتعالى إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد بعدد من صلى وصام اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد بعدد من قعد وقام وصل على جميع الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى الملائكة المقربين وعلى عباد الله الصالحين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين اللهم أذل الشرك والمشركين اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين اللهم انصر من نصر دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم واجعلنا منهم واخذل من خذل دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تجعلنا معهم اللهم انصرنا ولا تنصر علينا اللهم انكر لنا ولا تنكر علينا اللهم زدنا ولا تنقصنا اللهم آتنا ولا تحرمنا اللهم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وأدخلنا الجنة مع الأبرار يا عزيز يا غفار اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين في فلسطين وفي كشمير وفي سوريا وفي صومال وفي العراق وفي أفغانستان وفي باكستان وفي العالم كله واجعلنا من الذين يجاهدون في سبيلك حقا ولا يخافون فيك لومة لائم آمين يا رب العالمين آمين يا رب العالمين إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله العلي الجليل يذكركم وادعوه يستجيب لكم ولذكر الله تعالى أعلى وأولى وأكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون أقيموا الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
استووا واعتدلوا واستقيموا الله straight line to the back, to your heels on the line, straight line, make sure there are no gaps, make sure there are no spaces. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين ألهاكم التكاثر حتى زرتم المقابر كلا سوف تعلمون ثم كلا سوف تعلمون كلا لو تعلمون علم اليقين لترون الجحيم ثم لترونها عين اليقين ثم لتسألن يومئذ عن النعيم. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Inshallah, Sheikh Zia Sheikh will be here with us today. He will also be in the office for the next 15-20 minutes, inshallah. We will have about 15 or so books available in the office that he will, if you want, he will sign it for you. The rest of them, we had total 50, yes. Actually, it's a first come, first served basis, so you have to get there. Okay, you have to get to the office. If you don't get the book, we will take your money. We will take your money first. We will write your name down, and we will order more books, inshallah. The Sheikh has an endless supply, right, Sheikh? You have an endless supply? Yes, he has an endless supply, inshallah. So within 3 days they will be available. So if you don't get them, don't worry, inshallah. But we're going to keep a bulk of them for the evening tonight, because I don't want people to come in the evening and there's no books available. But don't worry, inshallah, you'll get them. Alhamdulillah, we had a breakfast this morning after Fajr. The brothers from some of the taxi brothers who come every day for Fajr, may Allah reward them. They worked all night, they made an amazing breakfast. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept it from them. Once again tonight, the Shaykh will be giving 2 lectures. If you can't make to one of them, right? Let's say you can't come after Maghrib. Don't let Shaitan play you into saying, let me not go to both of them. If you can't come to one, come to the other. But try to come to both, inshallah. Also, at tonight, those brothers who go to community center, it will be locked today. There will not be a salah there. It's not a masjid, so we can do that. We are encouraging you to come here, inshallah. Also, dinner will be served tonight. Dinner will be served tonight. And just the way the Shaykh was saying that, just like Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu went and announced to the people that the inheritance of the Prophet is being distributed in the masjid, inshallah, our plan was to have the first class last night with the Shaykh. But since he couldn't make it, from next week we will start a weekly class on Thursday nights. Weekly class on Thursday nights about the history of the Khulafa Rashidun. We will start with Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu and his life and his times, inshallah, and we'll go in detail. So please, and then when that topic finishes, we will change the topic, but that class will continue. If you have not been receiving notifications about the events, if you did not receive a notification about the cancellation of the event today, that means that you're not on the masjid notification list. And it's very important that you get on it. So if you're not on it, please come by the office, sign up your name, your phone number, your email address, and inshallah all events notifications will be sent to you as well. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.